Hello YouTube. This will be a video series dealing with slavery in the Bible. This will be quite a lengthy series because I plan on dealing with all the issues, contentions, conflicts that arise when we discuss and deal with slavery in the Bible, and I plan on dealing with all of the passages or relevant passages to the topic at hand. Like I said, this will be my first video dealing with slavery in the Bible. To begin with, I am a child of the Western world and a native of the rural American South. The word slavery is a powerful vortex of images, meanings, cries, and griefs to me. And any technical discussion of any type of forced labor becomes immediately inflamed when the word slavery is attached to it. And I suspect that many others share this association. Scholars in the ancient Near East have often abandoned the use of the general term slavery in the descriptions of the many diverse forms of master-servant that is manifest in the ancient world. There are very few true slave societies in the ancient world, with Rome and Greek being two of the major ones. And ancient Israel would have been seen outside this classification as well, at least in legislation, not so much in practice. Quoting from the Encyclopedia of Cultural Anthropology, Volume 4, 1996, scholars do not agree on the definition of slavery. The present Western image of slavery has been haphazardly constructed out of the representations of the experience in the 19th century abolitionist literature and later novels, textbooks, and films. From a global, cross-cultural, and historical perspective, however, New World slavery was a unique conjunction of features. In brief, most varieties of slavery did not exhibit the three elements that were dominant in the New World, such as slaves as property and commodities, their use as exclusively labor, and their lack of freedom. Slavery is a very relative term in our time period, and we have to be very careful in not auto-associating it with more vivid New World examples. For example, in the West, we would never say that the American president's cabinet members were his slaves, but this term would have been applied to them in the ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. And in the ancient Near East, even though children and family could be bought and sold, they were never actually referred to as slaves. The property aspect for such transaction did not define explicitly the notion of slavery. Quoting from A History of Ancient Near Eastern Law, Raymond Westbrook, 2003, freedom in the ancient Near East was a relative but not absolute state. As the ambiguity of the term for slave in all the regions' languages illustrate, slave could be used to refer to a subordinate in a social ladder. Thus, the subjects of a king were called as slaves, even though they were free citizens. The king himself, if a vassal, was a slave to his emperor. Kings, emperors, and commoners alike were slaves to the gods. Even a social inferior, when addressing a social superior, referred to himself out of politeness as your slave. There were, moreover, a plethora of servile conditions that were not regarded as slavery, such as son, daughter, wife, serf, or human pledge. There is plenty of scholarship that supports the notion that a single definition of slavery does not fit all forms of slavery found in the ancient culture. Furthermore, human relationships that were described as slavery in the ancient would be described differently today. So when a skeptic says that all slavery is the same, the skeptic is making a false statement. This video series will focus on slavery specifically in the Bible, and this video will begin to focus on slavery in the Old Testament. The specific case of slavery is more complex than it first appears. There is no monolithic institution of slavery in the Bible. Slavery is a loaded word today that doesn't necessarily describe what the institution was in the Bible. One definition does not fit the different models of slavery in the Bible. In fact, one definition does not fit the different models found in the Old Testament. The Old Testament has several models of what might be called slavery, and much of what passed as slavery in the ancient Near East, as I've already stated, is no longer considered such in a social-economic understandings of the period and era. In the New Testament case, the problem is hugely complicated by the seeming position that all social-economic institutions are neutral. There are three types of basic slavery in the Bible. Slavery is practiced by the Egyptians, the Canaanites, and the Assyrians, and other ancient peoples or civilizations in the region. Slavery as practiced and sanctioned by the Hebrew law, or practiced by the Israelites with rules for both Hebrews and foreign slaves. And then there's the Roman slavery that we find in the New Testament. Some slaves under the Roman system had some rights, but it doesn't necessarily fit any of the other categories. It seems reasonable in light of the history of slavery in America and the modern Western world that a definition of slavery such as non-consensual ownership of a human being would enter our minds when we hear the word. Clearly, there were ancient Near Eastern cultures that practiced a form of slavery that would fit the mentioned definition. Slavery such as practiced by the Egyptians, Canaanites, and Assyrians, and other ancient peoples in the region. However, even in these cases, some of these cases, this may not be a clear enough definition. Basically, our definitions and understandings of slavery are related directly to the practices of slave owners and slave traders in the New World and America pre-Civil War, which may or may not fit the practice of the ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. Slavery defined as a social economic system under which certain persons are deprived of personal freedom, are held against their will, or kidnapped, are deprived of the right to leave despite brutality by masters, or the right to receive compensation such as wages in return for their labor, might come to our minds when we hear the word. As such, slavery is unfree labor, and slaves can be treated less than human. And of course, this clearly fits pre-Civil War antebellum America and slavery in the New World. However, slavery in the ancient Near Eastern took many, many forms. Clearly, the forced enslavement of human beings, treating people with brutality, treating people as if they were less than human, is evil. And it is the evil that we often see in our minds when we think of slavery. But again, ancient Near Eastern people practice different or various forms of this. But the contention is, does the Mosaic Law sanction this? Does the God of the Old Testament sanction the non-consensual ownership, enslavement, mistreatment, the trading, and devaluing of human beings as societies have often practiced throughout mankind's history? Was Israel given the green light to engage in some of the most immoral practices of nations around them and throughout human history? This will be the focus of this and the following videos in this series. My contention is that slavery as sanctioned by the Mosaic Law and practiced by Israel was not non-consensual ownership of human beings. It was not a social economic system under which certain persons were deprived of personal freedom or held against their will or kidnapped, and were deprived of the right to leave despite brutality by masters, or the right to receive compensation such as wages in return for their labor, and where people could be treated less than human. It was not the forced enslavement of human beings. It was not treating people with brutality. It was not treating people as if they were less than human. In fact, God and the Bible specifically condemn these practices, and in essence condemn the very attributes of slavery that we would understand to make it immoral or evil. I will continue my discussion of slavery, and specifically slavery in the Old Testament, in part 2 of my video.